Jane, I think you've probably all met already. If somebody's looking for Jane, I say, the one with the hair. Sorry, Jane. Jane's one of our trustees, and she has been a power of energy. Her daughter is the patient, and Eve has had a rough time and is still having a rough time. Jane has been fighting for Eve and fighting for us and changing Gist Support UK. She was instrumental in getting this tissue bank started. She's been instrumental with others with Ramesh and me, and getting the Paul's Gist clinic set up. But one of her hobby horses, as you've probably gathered already, is the tissue bank, and she's going to spend a few minutes just explaining a bit more about it. So, Jane.
Thank you. Well, hopefully the first slide says it all. Nobody wants these gist tumours. Nobody is the last thing you'd ever expect to happen in your life. But when it does happen, obviously, it would be nice to think that there's somebody actually somewhere doing some research that might benefit you in the longer term. And I suppose this was triggered obviously by my own situation and the realisation that nobody seemed to be doing any research in this country, and when I went further afield into Europe, nobody was doing any research there, and the only place that we could find any particular research being done was in America. And having been to the clinic there, we came back to the UK, and Judith helped us, and Gist Support UK helped us to sort of identify where doctors were that had specialist interest in this area. And having decided we were going to set up a clinic, we then also listed a sort of a wish list of things that were necessary in order to get from where we were to having research. And on that wish list was to have a tissue bank. Now, it doesn't make sense just to have a tissue bank for wild-type gist if a tissue bank doesn't exist for gist as a whole, because what we want to try and get to, as far as the situation is concerned, if at some point in a researcher's development they decide they want to do research into gist, we don't want them to be discouraged from doing that by not being able to find the materials to do that work, and then say, oh, sorry, there wasn't enough around, I couldn't find any information, I couldn't find any tissue samples, so I'll go and do breast cancer, or I'll go and do liver cancer, or whatever, where materials are more freely available. So we have to help ourselves as a group to make it easy for people to help us by doing research. So the National Dish Tissue Bank, if you came to the last meeting, you'll have heard a really animated presentation from Professor Andrew Hall, who has been the facilitator, basically, of our dream. We wanted a bank, and he's a can-do sort of person, and now we have one. So, where we are in terms of the bank, obviously, when we first started, we'd identified the needs. We were introduced to Professor Andy Hall by, fortunately, my daughter's doctor, an oncologist who had been at university with Professor Hall. And when I went to him with a list saying, we need this, we need that, he went, okay, you need to speak to my friend. And that was how we met. And basically, we've been talking about the bank for some while. We've presented about it at our Oxford and Leeds meetings. And we're now at the situation from the wild-type gist point of view, where we're very keen to collect fresh tissue, not only for the bank, but also for these researchers who are endeavouring to grow cell lines and xenografts for us. A xenograph is where the cells are put into a mouse model, as it's called, and attempting to grow the tumour in a live mouse. And they can be used for all sorts of different research, including testing drugs in a living way, but not on a person, if you see what I mean, to try and safeguard the person. Now, since Eve's operation in November, we've been fortunate enough to be made aware of 4 other wild-type gist patients who were about to have operations, and we've engaged with them to say, would you be willing to have your tissue collected and used for research? And they've been very, very keen to do so. And it's, I suppose, a misunderstood thing from a patient's perspective. I mean, I don't know why you'd think any different, really, but most patients seem to imagine, and I would have been the same, that if you're having an operation, all this type of stuff is just naturally happening in the background. Thing is, it's not. What tends to happen currently is if you're having an operation, this is if you're any type of GIST, and all you've engaged with is a surgeon, then the GIST is removed, it's put in formalin, and then a part of it is taken to the hospital pathology lab and it's put into a paraffin block and stored. There's quite a high proportion of patients, my understanding is they don't actually then get, if it's been removed and you're clear of disease, you don't always get to see an oncologist. So mutational testing and that type of thing won't happen as standard, even in that sort of local area. So in terms of what we've needed to do so far is if any patient is having an operation, ideally we want to know about it in advance so that we can engage with your hospital, your surgeon, and the pathology department in that hospital, introduce them to Professor Andy Hall, and organise how fresh tissue is sent to the tissue bank. Obviously, it's slightly more complicated for wild type because we're also trying to send it to researchers as well who want the tissue within 24 hours effectively to be able to do their work. So where we are with this at the moment is a few weeks ago, Professor Hall and I were called to be reviewed by an ethics committee up in Newcastle. And we have now got the rubber stamp. I mean, we've had a bank, we've been collecting the odd sample here and there, but it's not the full-blown thing at the moment. This bank needs to be populated with all types of tissue samples. So if any of you should find yourself in a situation where you are going to be having an operation, please do make contact. And that's all you have to do, really, because once you've made contact and we're aware, we can give you the forms that you need to fill in and engage with the doctors, and the rest just happens behind the scenes then. All you need to worry about is making a good recovery. In terms of us, what we're doing, we've actually engaged with a team of specialists around the country, and they've agreed to become the GIST Support UK Medical Advisory Board. They'll also be the board that we're going to have a meeting in the not too distant future who will agree the sort of access terms so that when we have the bank fully populated, researchers come to us wanting samples of the tissue. This tissue is really valuable, it's rare, so we can't just be giving it away willy-nilly. They have to convince the Medical Advisory Board that the research they wish to undertake is worthy, it's not duplication, and it makes sense, and then they will be allowed to have tissue samples to use for their research. So, the main message there is that we do need all of you, and anyone else who should see this video. If you're a patient and you're about to have an operation, please do let us know. Our plans in terms of where we want to go with this is we do want to spread the word. So we do want to make contact with GIST surgeons around the country, because obviously they do their job brilliantly, but we do need to make them aware that perhaps with a GIST operation there is another method, and we want them to, rather than put the tissue straight into formalin, because it's not as useful that way, that they can send it to the path lab on ice and then we can have that material in that format. Along with the samples, to be fully useful to future research, we need a full blood sample, and we need some, I gather it is fairly standard to take normal tissue as well as tumour tissue, so those are the samples that they need. And in terms of our plans, obviously we need to actually help with some of the funding, because it costs quite a lot to courier tissue left, right and centre. I think we're just about to get a bill for something like £800 for one of the operations where we had to courier it to various places. So, and this is something which we're going to be funding. So obviously any fundraising we do, that's part of what we do it for, to try and get these things underway. So, sorry, I'm repeating myself again now. So what we need you to do, if you're having an operation, let us know as soon as possible. At this time, let me know. Hopefully, at some point in the future, we'll be able to give you some instructions and the word will get out, and, in a few years' time, it'll be just the natural way. An operation happens on a GIST patient, and this all happens. But for the time being, to get it underway, if you contact me, then I'll make sure that you engage with Professor Hall and everything works properly. Now, what have I said there? I've said all that already. So if you've had an operation, this is the other area where potentially you might have questions. So your tissue is going to be stored in a hospital wherever you had the operation, and there will be a little bit of it there still. So we still want access to that tissue, but it might be that the hospital where you've had your operation is one that specialises in GIST, and they actually want to hang on to their collection. The actual approach will be there that we want them to register the fact they have that tissue in their hospital with the bank, and therefore we still know how to get to it, and researchers may still be given access to it, but we don't have to go through all the palaver of having it physically transported to the bank. That's the other bit. So obviously we'll get some more information out over the coming months about what to do in relation to that, but I think the more immediate need is for up-and-coming operations for us to have that tissue. So our target is to have the most comprehensive selection of GIST tissue samples available for researchers. Just got to make it as easy as we possibly can for researchers to help us find answers. And that's it. Thank you very much. Are there any questions? No? Never mind. Oh, one.
When my GIST was removed 6 years ago, I seem to remember that it was sent to a tissue bank in Holland. Do you have access to banks of tissue elsewhere in Europe or the world?
I don't know. Possibly. Haven't asked that question yet. So, where was your operation?
It was done in Northampton.
In Northampton?
Then my care was transferred to Sheffield, and they did the necessary paperwork many weeks later. But my understanding was that bits of me fetched up in Holland.
Yeah, I would imagine. It's possible they sent it there for mutational testing,
Yes.
and they would have kept a sample. It's not usual for hospitals to. They hold on to this stuff. They don't really want to release it, so it's quite feasible in the original hospital they'll still have a sample of your tissue. They won't have sent all of it over to Holland.
You're very welcome to it.
All right, okay, thank you. Well, that's the point, you see. I mean, none of us want it, so we might as well have it sent somewhere where it's actually going to make a difference.
I had my operation 6-8 weeks ago,
Yeah.
and I was informed that pathology wasn't part of the hospital, it was sent away. So would they still have, the hospital still have it? Because I understood it was like an outsourced service.
Well, they might have sent it to another pathology department. Which hospital?
Winchester
Yeah.
Hospital.
I don't know where. Well, it's a question for you to ask. Where did it go?
Yes. Okay.
And if you can find out where it went, then obviously we can get it registered with the bank. That would be a good thing to do. Okay. Oh, another one, sorry.
Mine was similar to this lady. I was operated at North Staffs, and apparently most of mine was sent to Birmingham, but some of the histology was done at North Staffs because there was a big delay, big gap of months before we had some results. So who would I approach in relation there?
Well, you'd probably ask your local hospital in the first place, but if it's gone to Birmingham, it's likely to have gone to Philippe, who was talking earlier on, because he's his main histopathologist in Birmingham, so feasibly it's within his collection, but your hospital should be able to tell you whether it's there or with him, so that would be how you'd find it.
How long do hospitals keep it for, Jane?
Years and years. I don't know how many, but a long time. Right, okay, thank you very much.
Right. So now we're going to have our trustee panel. Are you going to introduce it? No. Right. So where should we sit down?
Yes.
Right, we are a subset of the trustees. I think, Nick, are you going to start off?
I thought what we'd do first is just give you a little précis of who we are. I'll start with me. I'm Nick Puntis. I'm a trustee. I'm also involved in the publications. So when anybody requests publications, any of the publications that are on our website, you email me through the website, and if it works well, I send you the publications that you ask me for. So that's my role. I also have had a gist removed, so I'm a patient. Tim Mason is also a trustee. He'll be talking to you in a minute about the hospital rep scheme that we're doing. He's also a patient with a gist. We've got Michael, who is also a trustee with a gist as well. And obviously you all know Judith, who is our founding chairwoman and acting chairwoman today as well. Also has a gist or had a gist removed.
You got the first, that's it. Some of you know this history already, but a lot of you won't. Gist Support UK started many years ago, and Dave Cook, who is hiding somewhere, was our first, there he is, was our first chair, and we were actually started by Novartis, totally funded by Novartis in the early days. And the first meeting that I went to, I think there were 10 patients, and I think we are now about 60 patients here today. So we've, sorry, 70. So we've progressed quite a lot. Our main job, as you know, is raising awareness, supporting patients, producing publications for patients and doctors, and the website, of course. And we represent patients both in this country and abroad. And we have representatives on NICE committees if they're appraising new drugs, new treatments. And Michael and I are both members of the SPAIN, which is the Sarcoma Patients Euro Network. And we're off to a conference in Amsterdam in a week or two. So we represent GIST patients on an international scene. We have been involved in the New Horizons conferences as well, although these are becoming less significant, I think, at the moment. The sort of things that we may do. I was at a conference in Innsbruck a few weeks ago, being the patient voice in a big European study for metastatic GIST that I referred to briefly this morning. That's a very interesting study looking at non-drug treatments for metastatic GIST. I don't know, as Ramesh said, how it's going to influence us in the short term. It probably won't, because it's a European study, and the first clinical trials are going to be probably not for a couple of years anyway, and they'll all be conducted in Europe. But what we're hoping to learn from this study is for the future, and I think GIST has been chosen as a sort of prototype for this kind of study, and if it's successful in GIST, it can then be rolled out for other kinds of cancer, which is why they've got so much money from Europe, which is really good. Things have changed enormously. When I was first diagnosed, I was given, well, you might live 2 years. Well, that was 14 years ago, and I'm still here, and I'm well, and I'm free of disease. So things have moved on enormously. Imatinib, of course, was the huge starter for our cure and our treatment, really. It's been absolutely amazing. Sutent then followed, and we've now got regorafenib, which you can get now. It's not NICE approved, but I think it's regularly available through the Cancer Drugs Fund. Adjuvant imatinib is now approved. We've got the pause GIST you've heard about, and some of us patients have actually become the experts. And the longer you're with us, the more expert you will all get. We are the experts. I know the doctors know the medical terms and all the technology, some of which went way over my head this morning, I confess. but actually we know what it's like. At this big meeting in Innsbruck of about 50 specialist doctors and, all these people, I was the only one who knew what it was like to take imatinib, who'd had a liver resection. The others were all talking about it. I knew. Right, now I'm going to pass on to Michael, I think, is next.
Well, I'm Michael Sayers, and I suppose my biggest involvement in GIST Support UK is in helping people get onto the what we call the Mail Talk email forum. It'd be interesting to see how many people are here who are on the Mail Talk email forum. Listserv. But where you type in how you're doing and you get replies from people like me and other people. How many people take part in that? Quite a number. Not everybody quite, but obviously anyone who's interested in signing up to that, I'm more than happy to talk to them afterwards, and it's very easy to do. All I need is an email address and one or two other details from you, and I can, as it were, bung you on. I'm not quite sure how many of us on the GIST Support UK trustees can do that, but I know that Judith can, and David, and Barbara. I've had GIST. I was diagnosed 10.5 years ago. I was told at the time that I could maybe survive 5 years, maybe even 8 years, with a bit of luck. And certainly all these, these graphs that they have with all these lines going down like that, well, in those days, they all finished round about the 5, 6, 7 year period of zero survival. That's what it looked like to my inexpert eyes anyway. But there seem to be an awful lot more of us outliving those expectations. That is simply because of the advances in the treatments, the new drugs, and there seems to be a general willingness in the medical profession dealing with GIST to look after us as patients, which is very moving. And it's not just in this country; it seems to be, more generally further afield. And so, Judith mentioned the sarcoma patients Euronet, which means that they're a European patient advocates body, and at their conferences we have people coming from all over Europe, Milan, Berlin, Paris, experts coming from there, giving their time freely and willingly, sometimes over several days, because their sort of conferences last 2 or 3 days, and they are amazingly dedicated and free in their willingness to talk to patients face to face, in pretty general terms at least. Anyway, that's about my done. I'll hand over to Tim.
Thanks, Michael. I'm Tim Mason, and I've had GIST. It sounds like a Narcotics Anonymous meeting. Yeah. I've had GIST for 9 years now. But when I was first diagnosed, my whole world crashed to the ground, and I got quite severely depressed, actually. And one of the major ways of finding help was through discovering GIST Support UK. And so we're very keen, as a body of trustees, to increase the awareness of GIST. Now, GIST, as we heard this morning, it's a very, very small group of people. But when you've got it, or you know someone who's got it, it's pretty major. So we're looking at various ways of doing just that, to making GIST better known, and trying to help awareness for those who are perhaps newly diagnosed and who know people who are. So some of the ways that we're looking at are on the screen, developing our meetings, also making sure that literature is in every hospital, because it's amazing, and I've heard some stories today, it's amazing how many people here even were inappropriately diagnosed, or there were major delays, or people simply didn't, some of the clinicians apparently just didn't know what they were doing. So we still have a lot to say to those people. So what we're... Sorry, I can't do anything about paper. What we're planning to do, what we launched at our last patient meeting, was a scheme to have a representative, a patient representative for GIST at every hospital across the country. And we've already got people who very kindly have volunteered, who will cover about 22 hospitals around the country. Unfortunately, after that meeting, our stocks of literature ran out, but we now have stocks, there we are, thank you, Jane, of a brand new brochure leaflet called GIST for Beginners. And we have plenty of supply of other leaflets too, so we can provide a pack to each hospital representative. So we'll be following up those people who very nobly volunteered before, but the catch is we're also looking for more people. So if any of you, searching your heart, would be able, willing and healthy enough to be that link with the hospital that you're under, we would be inordinately grateful. And we have literature so that if you're able to take some with you today, we can give you an initial pack. Otherwise, if you give me your name and address afterwards, we can send it to you, or Nick will send it to you. Our aim, as I think I said, is to make sure that every hospital in the country is covered. And if you're not able to speak to me afterwards, or one of us, on the questionnaire, the feedback form that you've got in front of you on the tables, on the reverse is a questionnaire, and there's space to put your name and address and contact details if you're interested in being such a volunteer to be our kind of hospital reps. Thank you very much. That would help. Basically, it would be to be, in the first place, to ensure that your hospital has an adequate and ongoing supply of literature about GIST. Secondly, to be the link with the hospital to GIST Support UK, and generally to ensure that that link works smoothly. So it'll mean contacting, well, staying in contact with your consultant, the clinical nurse specialist as well.
Time-consuming, really. I mean, if you use your appointments as a means to also take along some literature with you, and just make sure it's there for other patients that go there, because in my experience, you go to your clinic, you don't actually know who the other GIST patients are, and you're probably sat in amongst them, and there are some there that are just newly diagnosed and would really benefit from a book like this, and to be aware that there are other people with that condition.
Yes, so I don't know if you could all hear that, but Jane's saying that really it's not an onerous task, because you will all have appointments and you'll meet your consultant then, you can talk to other members of staff there, give them literature, and if your hospital's like mine as well, it'll have a sort of cancer information centre too. What have I missed? Yes, also the tissue bank form. If you can make sure that your hospital is supplied with those, and that your oncologists and so on are up to date with that. So have I covered everything to do with the role of hospital representative? Please do think about it very carefully, because we do think it's a major way of ensuring that this lesser known and often unknown form of cancer is known by those who need to. Thanks. Who's next?
In terms of our ambitions, we're kind of laying out what our plans are for the future. Obviously, we're volunteers, we're individuals. Believe it or not, we do have lives outside of GIST, although it doesn't seem like that most of the time. And I suppose what we're asking is to our captive audience to just try and raise it in your awareness that you may not have any time at all, but there's probably a little thing that you could do that would actually benefit the whole. And if we all do a tiny bit, it's amazing what we'll be able to achieve. We've achieved quite a lot as a very small group, so with an extended group, you know, we'll achieve much more. So in terms of ambitions, we want to develop the Paul's GIST project. We want to build a patient data set to stimulate and fund GIST research, and we want this clinic to be part of the national health system. And we are going through and have been going through a lot of activities to try and realise all of those goals for the clinic. Now, the clinic has been one very successful GIST Support UK project. We set our sights on what we wanted to achieve, and it's not the end result yet. We've only really started this year, but all the signs are very positive and we are making headway. But there are many other GIST-specific projects that we need to get underway. You know, obviously the tissue bank, it started, it's not the full-blown article because it hasn't got the tissues, as I mentioned just now. We need to make it the national standard. Mutational analysis needs to be a standard practice when people are diagnosed with GIST, so they know what type of GIST they've got. As we go through time, even in the 4 years that I've been involved with this, we've gone from a situation where I don't think it was even on the discussion table then for the meetings I went to, but it's becoming clearer and clearer that if you can understand what type of GIST you have, potential is there will be, as we move through time, a targeted medicine that will be specifically relevant to that particular type of GIST. So it needs to become standard. And we want to be in a position as an organisation that we can actually show encouragement to researchers, maybe fund in its entirety a research project if it's a small one, or at least offer some funding that could be matched by other sources to facilitate GIST research. So, how do we do this? Nick.
I drew the short straw. As has been mentioned this afternoon by a number of our trustees, we are all volunteers. We all lead busy lives. My own personal situation, I've had a GIST in 2010, that was removed. In 2012, my wife had breast cancer, that was removed. I run a business, my wife has just run a business, has just started her own business as well. That's part of therapy, to be honest, to get her mind off her condition. But because we're all busy, it's a decision to become a trustee or any other sort of help within an organisation like this has to be self-motivated. Now, we at the moment have trustees that do various different roles. We have a treasurer. We have somebody who does the hospital reps. We have somebody who stands in as our chair when particular people may not be very well. We have other people such as Jane, Judith, Barbara, who go to conferences. We distribute the workload amongst us in order to facilitate making this type of meeting as informative as possible to everybody here. But we need more trustees. So what I would like you to do is have a think about whether or not you do have any spare time that would involve coming to these meetings twice a year, and the day before these meetings coming to a trustees meeting where we discuss what's going on within the world of GIST. Judith mentioned earlier that we're experts. I've certainly become much more of an expert in GIST because of my involvement within the trustees. That was a deliberate act by me because I'm the sort of person that likes to be informed as to what's going on with the cancer that I have got and what the next step might be, so that I personally can feel more confident about my future. Tim mentioned that he went through some depression when he was first diagnosed, and he found solace and help within the GIST community in order to help him out of that and to become positive. He's turned it around so much that he's now a trustee. So it's a positive therapeutic thing for you to do as well. So we're looking for anybody that has any finance experience that could potentially take on a treasurer's role, because our treasurer, who's done it for 3 years, Barry is at the back, he met you all when he came in. He's done 3 years, and he has other projects that he wants to get involved with, so he'll be retiring the early part of next year. So we'd like to recruit somebody who's going to take on the role of a treasurer and maybe shadow him for a while to see what that role entails. Social media, again, that's a very important part of getting the name out there, getting people to recognise and know what GIST is. We've added the word cancer to our tagline, because a lot of people, when you say we've got a GIST or we talk about GIST, what's that? When you say we've got GIST cancer, they might then say, what does the GIST stand for? But at least they know what cancer is. And if we need to send that out to as many people as we can, and we can do that through social media. Hospital reps, again, reiterate what Tim said about getting more hospital reps, spreading that word. Graphics, if anybody is good with graphics, or you know somebody that's good with graphics that can improve upon or support what we've done with the information that we have, and how we can best advertise ourselves. Fundraising, we're coming on to fundraising a bit later, but yeah, absolutely. The trustee role is a more formal role, but if we have volunteers that say, yes, I don't want to be a trustee, but I can certainly help you with these certain roles, then great. We want to hear from you. And you can do that in a number of ways. You can come and speak to one of us after the meeting. You can email us if you go home and have a think about it and decide, actually, yes, I think I would like to help and get involved. Or we have like I did, when I became a trustee, I filled in the form that you have on your tables, and I had a call from one of the trustees, and it went on from there. So have a think about it. Think whether or not there's anything there that you can help with, and bear in mind that you're helping yourselves as well as the trustee, as well as the GIST community as a whole. Back over to Jane.
Okay. Right, so in terms of obviously how we realise our ambitions, there are some things which just mean we want some time and some skill. That might not float your boat, you might not feel you can commit to anything like that. But if you can help in other ways, fundraising is also a very useful way. And if you don't fancy climbing mountains and doing marathons, there are all sorts of just quiet ways that you can do this and be helpful. It may be you've got some energetic family members who are itching to do something for somebody and don't quite know where to channel that energy. Well, ask them to channel it in our direction. Be really helpful. So just to give you some idea of how some focus can actually make a difference. Obviously, 4 years ago, Paul's GIST didn't exist. We've had obviously some very helpful friends and family, and some families in particular have taken their own decision. I'm a wild type GIST patient, I need to do something to assist this process. And we've gone from 0 in terms of existence and funds to more than £80,000 raised purely through fundraising from quite a relatively small group of people. Obviously, we're going to be putting this, we've started to spend this money already because we're facilitating the clinics and various other things that I've mentioned already. And the work continues. We can't just say we've got 80,000 because that's going to disappear quite quickly as we spend it on the various projects we're doing. So it's an iterative process. We do need to keep it going. So the sorts of things that we've put together on your table, each of you will see a rather cute, in my opinion, but some people say hideous, monkey smiling out at you from a calendar. I'd like to think that some of you would consider buying one of these. And if you've bought one, you might like to encourage some of your friends and family to buy one. They're only £8.50. The photographs are by Charlie Hamilton James, who some of you may have heard of. He's the wildlife photographer. I think he trained under David Attenborough, and he's on the BBC quite regularly. But he gave us these photographs, and the other person who facilitated the funding of these calendars said he wanted to raise awareness of the situation, didn't want the money just to go into a pot and not use it for anything meaningful. So that's something we've done there. We're also launching the Paul's Gist 500 Club. We're looking for energetic people who can in any way commit to, or with a group of people, commit to raising £500 over the next year, because we want to raise a fund for Paul's Gist research to top up what we're actually raising already. Now, this is an example. Now, in terms of, and that's specific to Paul's Gist, that particular project. So, in terms of Gist Support UK, obviously the funds that are raised, we do have people who raise funds for us, and we're very grateful to them, and we're very grateful also for the funding that we receive from Novartis and Pfizer. And the way these funds are used are for patient meetings, back office costs, literature, production, presentation and conference materials, all these posters, etc. Our website, it facilitates us going to all the travelling costs to go to these various meetings where we are the patient voice. And we did also, a couple of years ago, give a £20,000 bursary for a research project with Professor Judson, which is ongoing. And that, as I say, we get updates every now and again about how that's going. So we're really very grateful to everybody who's helped us so far. I mean, of note, in terms of individuals or groups who've raised over £1,000 for us, these people named here are people that have made tremendous, given us tremendous help. You all know who you are. I mean, I will mention, obviously, Vicky at the top of the pile, purely because her and her family climbed Snowdon earlier this year and raised over £10,000 as a result of doing that. And that was somebody who we didn't know until March this year. She came to the clinic and felt, I have to do something to help this process more. And that's one person who's made quite a big difference.
I think that is also.
So while obviously this group that we're mentioning here, obviously Robert Beale, that's Nick's friend who ran the London Marathon and raised over £2,000, I think it was. Steve Greaves, who did a skydive, he's somebody who actually isn't part of our group as such. He wrote to us saying he'd had a GIST operation, he'd found the information on our website and the booklets that we'd sent him really useful. And him and his son they'd already booked a skydive for the 21st birthday for the son, and they decided he's had the operation, he was fine, and they're going to go ahead and do this, and we want to do it and get some sponsorship for GIST Support UK. So they've raised a significant amount of funds for us. So, as I say, the other projects that we want to get underway, to give you some idea of the costs, obviously, just to keep GIST Support UK kind of going as is, costs around about £20,000 a year. And obviously I mentioned earlier the cost of the courier, and that was just for one tissue sample to go to 3 places, £900. And because it's a specialist courier, they have to carry these containers, ice and etc. And they're especially geared up to do it. In terms of research grants, obviously we've given one. We'd like to be in a position to give more. And the only way we can do that is if we have more funds to do it with. And to give you some idea of the sorts of funds we're talking about, a small research grant, is going to be £10,000 to £20,000. Average research grants can cost anything upwards from £50,000. It depends on who's doing it, what they want to do, and they'll each come forward. So what we're saying is, with these collection boxes, etc., that we've got, if there's any other mechanism you can facilitate to think about how you and your extended network might be able to assist, then we'd be very, very pleased if you might consider it. So I know this sounds like a real hard sell. Don't get me wrong, it is a hard sell. Need your help. So we've got fundraising packs. We've actually put some thought into what might you need to be able to help us to raise funds. So these packs, which we can send to you, I think we've got some outside. that you can take a flick through them. They just give you some ideas on things, you know, little and large, that you might be able to consider. Every little bit helps. And I say what we're asking for is really for you to help us to help improve the future for all GIST patients, and put us and our needs for research on the agenda as high as possible. So, thank you very much. The other thing we'd like to do now is we'd like whoever is on this list that's actually here to come up, and we've got a small token of our appreciation that we'd like to give you, and we'd like to use it as a bit of a photo opportunity as well. And obviously we'd like rapturous applause for Vicky Rockingham, Jackie and Gary McCarthy, Debbie Mitchell, and me.
Thank you very much. Well done. Thank you.
We're going to show one.
Yes, thank you. Well done. Thank you very much.
Right, brilliant. Thank you.